Hello and welcome to today's episode of Academy 21's podcast. Today's theme is bringing your best self to the classroom, and I'm joined by one of our fabulous teachers, Patricia O'Boyle, who has been working with Academy 21 for a number of years as a teacher in our English department. So welcome, Patricia.
Hi, Amy.
Hi. I have a few questions for you. The first one, I think, is a fairly obvious one, but what do we mean by bringing your best self to the classroom?
It's a really interesting statement, and I think it will mean lots of different things for different people. So aside from lesson preparation, subject knowledge, for me, I think one of the biggest things and actually has the biggest impact is our human connection. So that idea of remembering that we are human. And I think bringing your best self is bringing that sense of being human to students.
Absolutely.
So for me in a classroom, it's about, being our authentic self, humour, openness. And I think a key part for me, and I think most of my students will say happens most days, is not being afraid to make mistakes in a classroom and to model that really for students. When we take part in professional learning, we sometimes take the place of students, and you realise how nerve-wracking it can be to have a go of a poll and actually to say to students, I understand how that feels and I've made a mistake here, I'm going to rectify it. In particular, it is one thing I really think is quite important. Other things that I think are useful, the idea of connection with students. I think when people think about us teaching online, I don't think that always comes to the fore, but actually it's such a huge part. And actually, I think the human connection's even more important when we teach online because we aren't physically in a classroom. But that idea of being your best self is that idea of being present, being able to bounce ideas off each other, to connect with students. So for me, I think that's bringing your best self to a classroom.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And certainly in my experience, I picked up on a couple of words you said there, but authenticity is really important, particularly for our young people in secondary who are in that adolescent stage, because they pick up if something is insincere and they pick that
Definitely.
up easily. And so bringing your authentic self is really important. And that's why our teachers, they're all different. They vary from teacher to teacher, but it's about bringing the best version of your teacher self to the classroom. And like you said, ensuring that human connection is established early on so that our students feel ready and willing and able to participate. And that's something that you have particular skill in, hence being invited to come and talk to us today. If it's okay with you, Patricia, I have another few questions for you.
Of course.
So the next one, why is it so important for students to bring our best self? We've unpacked a little bit of that in your first answer, but I'm thinking particularly those students who are in alternative provision, where they may have had some sort of adversity or perceived sense of failure before accessing alternative provision. Why is it more important here than anywhere else?
I think you've mentioned something so important, that idea of many of our students come to us and they've not had an easy start to their educational journey. So we are in a position of trust with really vulnerable students. So the great thing I think about Academy 21 and that idea of our best self is that idea that it's a fresh start. We don't know the backgrounds of the students in the sense that we haven't got that shared, in year 7 you did this or something that might kind of bring a negative aspect. It's a real fresh start and to build that fresh relationship. And you really see that from students. The number of times students have said, I've never received a certificate before in my academic journey, because it's that sense of starting something new. So that idea of not having preconceived ideas about our students is invaluable. We also break down barriers in the sense that they call us by our first name. There's that comfort aspect that I think we don't necessarily have that hostility that we sometimes encounter on the corridors, put your blazer on or tuck your shirt in. We can break down those barriers. So I think it's really important so that we're able to establish that relationship. And for me, I think that idea of some students maybe not trusting education, it's that idea of being welcoming, being open, being encouraging, letting students see that you're happy to have them in front of you, which I don't think maybe has happened with all of our students possibly in the past, that they've had that connection. And I think also that idea of trying to create, we had our professional learning last year with Helen Day, those micro moments, and they're so important. Often it will be breaking down barriers of shared anecdotes. So, this week, spiders and exclamation marks has been my micro moments where lots of students have been able to connect with us on a human level in particular. And I think also you've got that sense of also giving them time if some students need a bit of time to just sit there and just take part before they build up to actually participating in lessons, giving them that breathing space rather than why haven't you maybe done any work today, to build up slowly. And often that's such a win moment when a student will actually do a task or take part in a poll where they've been really quiet because they've just started to trust you. So I think it's hugely important for all students, but in particular for our students.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And you mentioned there, acknowledging and recognizing when students have participated for the first time. And that could often be just by answering a question in a poll or popping a message to you in the chat or using the emoji button to thumbs up that they've understood something. And it's those small breakthrough moments that for students who haven't participated up to this point or who've missed significant chunks of learning before joining Academy 21, it's those magic moments that really start to build those building blocks of self-confidence and that sense of belonging. And I deserve this lesson and I am good enough to participate, and it's been recognized and rewarded by my teacher. And so yeah, all of that works together to start to build up a really healthy relationship.
It's a privilege to be in that position, to see that actually it's such a joy when that happens.
Yeah, it really is. My next question, slightly different and possibly trickier to answer, Patricia, but having been a teacher myself for many, many, many years, I've certainly found myself in this scenario myself. So my question to you is, how can we as teachers recognise when we're perhaps not bringing our best self to the classroom? When there may have been something that morning, there may have been something going on in our personal life, but there's an underlying reason why we're perhaps not bringing our best self to the classroom. And crucially, why is it important that we can recognise that, and what can we do about it?
I think that's again a really interesting question, because it will be different for different people. And it's something I think I am still certainly working on, that idea of the boundary sometimes between classroom and home life. I think a lot of teachers find an aspect, and I think trying to set boundaries is really useful, because I think we need space away, we need time to recuperate and have that energy to bring back into the classroom. So setting boundaries is important. It's something I'm still working on, I must say, but working from home, the idea of having a separate space. I quite like to have some time just to not talk at the end of the day and to sort of decompress a little bit, just to sort of charge my batteries, I think, really. One of the best things I think about working at Academy 21, I'm talking about the English department in particular, but all of the staff, is that idea of support as well. So I really feel very much that sense of being able to go to a colleague and say, I'm finding this difficult, and there's always somebody on hand. And I think that really creates such a welcoming and supportive atmosphere. I'm trying this. So again, I'm not an expert at this just yet, but I'm trying to timetable to have some nice things in life. So for example, I have timetabled lessons, or you might have a dentist appointment timetabled in, and you feel that's quite crucial to go to. But I don't know if we always, as humans, timetable something nice. So it could even be, watching a TV program, or I like to, get a podcast on and walk the dog, and to try and make sure that that's quite immovable, in the sense that that's going to make me feel better, bring more energy then to the classroom in particular. And I think also the idea, I mentioned it in the first part, is we are human. And I think students can also appreciate that. So the amount of times, over the years, I've had to pause my mic and sneeze because, it's winter time and a cold's on the way. And, oh, I'm really sorry, I've got a cold today, and just being able to sort of be kind to ourselves. And I think students, as you mentioned about being our authentic self, I think they appreciate when we have that resilience as well, and to show them and model that for them. But I think it can be difficult. I think it's an ongoing process. But that idea of remembering that you're human and you're doing your best as well.
Yeah, and I really like the way you leaned into vulnerability there as an important component when we're working with our young people in terms of, sharing if there's something like that. If if you perhaps have a sore throat or you're feeling a bit under the weather, actually just being human and sharing that with them allows them to see that it's okay to not always be at 100%. And there's a power in the vulnerability of that too. And I also like the way you talked about I think, if I've interpreted this correctly, recognizing what strategies work for you as an individual.
Definitely.
The teaching profession is hard. Our sector, to work in this sector, particularly in today's world, is a challenge. The workload is high, the complexity of need, the expectations. It's one of the most rewarding jobs. I can't think of a more rewarding job to do. And it's also challenging. And so the ability to be self-aware and recognize when you're not feeling your best and take proactive measures to address that's within your gift to control, like as you said, block out time for activities or things that are good for your own mental well-being. For me, it's going for a swim, or it's spending time with my own children, or cooking and hosting dinner for friends. But it's that sense of really understanding yourself and what you need to use your word, to decompress. And,
Yeah.
making sure that then all of those wellbeing activities that are there to support you lead to you being able to show up for the students in a way that's really authentic and really measured, and just enjoy their company and enjoy seeing them progress through their academic curriculum.
Yeah.
Thanks, Patricia. Okay, next question for you. What difference do you think it makes to students when teachers are approachable and authentic? What difference and what impact does that have on their learning, for example?
I think if we all reflect on our own time at school, we often remember that teacher, that one teacher who you had that connection with or that you inspired you. And I think it is about shared connection, often in particular. And energy is quite contagious, isn't it? And enthusiasm.
Yeah.
So if you have, and I don't mean, all singing, all dancing constantly. I just mean that sort of welcomeness, welcoming, that humour, that energy is contagious. And I think it supports students in taking that first step to engage in a lesson. And that idea about, it can be enthusiasm about a topic. It could be talking about student interests. I always try to bring in some part of a lesson where a student can have the opportunity to talk about something maybe they're interested in or something they're going to be doing that's exciting. And celebrating every victory, I think, is so wonderful, however small. So it might be having a go of a poll, getting a certificate, a special mention certificate. It makes a real difference when we have that shared connection. Another thing I think as well for students is if we're genuine, and you mentioned it earlier, some of our students have faced so many barriers that it is going to take time to break those down. So I think being your best and having that energy connection, but it's also consistency. And one of the things I love about our timetable is that they'll see me at the same time every day, all week, and I'm there. That's really key for our students. Some of them have not had a sense of consistency before, and there's a sense of safety and nurturing atmosphere that comes with that. And you notice sometimes if you cover a lesson, they're like, where's where, they like that reassurance of having the same person. So I think it really does make a difference for our students.
It really does. And as you said, that routine and that consistency and our approach with ensuring that the same member of staff is there Monday to Thursday for the live sessions with the students, that all helps to build a sense of psychological safety and containment for our students, and the predictability of knowing that person and trusting in the connection and the relationship that you have allows them to take perhaps a little bit more risk in their learning and participate in ways that they may not have felt comfortable to do in other settings. So I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Okay, we're coming towards the end of our time. I could talk to you all day about this, Patricia. It's a real passion of mine in terms of self-awareness and making sure that we're using all of the tools in our toolkit to support the best possible teaching for our students. I think, tools that are within our gift to control, things like you talked about energy quite a lot, which I love. I love unpacking what that actually means. But we're thinking about things like the prosody and the intonation in our voice. So if we recognise that a student is particularly anxious, I've seen the way you and other colleagues across the school have just tailored your own pace and pitch of conversation to bring that energy right back down to make sure that the student feels safe and comfortable. And equally, when we feel like, especially on a Friday, when our students need that va-va-voom of energy, we're able to use our body language, use our facial expressions, bring up that intonation in our voice and create that sense of shared energy that, as you quite rightly said, is contagious. And we feed off of each other, don't we, when we're in connection with young people and adults, or, you know, student to student, for example. And so our teachers being able to be aware of that, number one, and influence it, number two, is really, really powerful and particularly important online. So thank you for that. I'm going to wrap up with one last question. So you are an incredible teacher, Patricia, and like I said, you've been with Academy 21 for a number of years now, and I hold you in such high regard in terms of the practice that I've seen and also the feedback that you get from students that's personal to you, and it's always a delight to read. So for your final question, when we think about teachers as people as well as professionals, what's important to you personally to ensure that you're always your best self for the students that we serve at Academy 21?
Again, I found this quite a hard topic, really. When we first looked at this topic of bringing your best self, it took me a while to break it down. I thought, well, what does that actually mean? And it will vary very much depending on each person's. Aside from, lesson preparation and subject knowledge, that is huge. That is a huge part of it. But I think bringing our best self, as I've mentioned, it really is about that relationship that we can have, being open, being vulnerable, giving students access to you as a human, however comfortable. I think, as I mentioned, that will change depending on the person and how comfortable you feel. But that idea of looking for commonality, pets are such a barrier, a way to break down barriers with our students. If we talk about pets, breaking down things with relatable anecdotes, and really for me, that's often my strategy, to try and find any way in, really, to try and have some sort of commonality or shared connection with students that we can use then to, as you mentioned, building blocks and stepping stones to help them be the best version of themselves, really.
Fantastic. Thank you, Patricia. And that's definitely something that we can all take away and put into practice if we don't do that already. But I think your commitment and tenacity in, as you say, finding a way, finding that commonality and establishing that rapport with the students is a huge cornerstone of your success as a teacher. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode.
Oh, thanks for having me. Oh, thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Alternative Provision podcast from Academy 21, accredited online provision for students in years 5 to 11. Learn more at academy21.co.uk.